some of the most common sensor output types. Typically, we see two different types of output types. You'll see a discrete sensor. Again, we talked about as the product is there, presence or absence. Basically looking for a target at a given location. And that's the most common application that we see out there. Analog sensors are another type of output we see. Typically, it's proportional position feedback, used in a lot of robotics, continuous processing, looking at level control, and again, positioning. Within the discrete output types, you'll see a lot of electromechanical, which is the relay type contacts, typically used for 120 volt AC is where we see those most commonly. And then you got your solid state side of things where you got track, transistor, the FET, and analog, and then some of your Ethernet network type outputs, which are becoming more predominant. IO link as well falls into that. So again, just a little bit about the electromechanical relays. Typically they're using 120 volt, 240 volt AC type contacts inside of those or signals. They're low cost, general purpose. One thing to keep in mind with the electromechanical relays, it is a mechanical object. So if you've got a continuous process that's running 24/7, these things do have a finite life in them. So they will wear out, especially if you're moving product at a high speed and that's constantly opening and closing those contacts. Again, usually a longer response time to operate. Outputs from multiple sensors can be wired in series pretty easily. So again, that's a positive thing for them. On the solid state side of things, again, they're usually 0 to 30 volts DC. Most of the time 24 volt DC is what we see most common. Low leakage current, very fast response time, down in the milliseconds or microseconds. Again, most of the time they're going back to a PLC. A lot of times we see customers using an NPN type output or a PNP type output, and we'll talk a little bit about those and the differences. So this is an example of a NPN transistor type output. You can see here where the load is wired into the circuit. And then if we look at a PNP type circuit, you can see where the load moved in the circuit. This is a pretty common asked question, or a lot of times customers don't know what they have. So just keep in mind these diagrams when you're looking at your application. A lot of sensors out there can be wired for either or, and some of the newer technology from Rockwell can actually automatically detect whether it's PNP or NPN. So you just use a single wire for whichever circuit and it picks the one it needs. On an analog style output, typically it's a scaled type output, and its output is proportionate or inversely proportionate to the signal received by the sensor. So most common ones we see are 1 to 10 volt DC, 4 to 20 milliamp DC, but you can see down there at the bottom, you got another 1 to 20 milliamp option as well. So a lot of times these outputs can be scaled within the sensor, or they can be scaled within the PLC for positive or negative slope. So just because you're dealing with it in a PLC does not mean it's not able to be set up in the sensor as well.